Alright guys, hopefully everyone can hear me fine. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Cooking with Coach, presented by Coach Misha Live. Today what we're going to be making is another recipe that comes to us from Mecca Fitness, and they're a great nutrition team. What we're going to be doing is chocolate chip protein cookies. You can see the ingredients all up here. You're going to need old-fashioned oats, some chocolate protein powder, an egg, some vanilla extract, chocolate chips, butter, baking soda, agave or honey, some raw cane sugar, and salt. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to preheat our oven to 350, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It is now preheating at 350, so let's grab the rest of our ingredients. I have my chocolate protein powder, and I use my protein, but you can really use whatever you'd like. I have my bag of old-fashioned oats. I have my chocolate chips. I really don't have that many, so they're not going to be like super chocolatey or anything for the chips. I'm also going to grab 100% cacao chips, so that's going to be pretty bitter, but overall a little bit healthier than actual chocolate chips. In addition, we're also going to need one egg. I have that right here, as well as some butter. And then we're going to need some vanilla extract. Really don't have that much left. I definitely don't think I have enough for the entire recipe. We're gonna need about 1 tablespoon, but that's alright. I might have like a teaspoon or so, but that's just mostly for flavor, not really for actual like substance. And we're also gonna need some baking soda. So I have my baking soda here, as well as a little bit of honey. And I have my honey right here. Ideally, you'd want to use agave, but agave and honey are pretty similar. They're both just like a sweetener, so either one will do fine. And then some raw cane sugar, and I have that right here. I think that's it. So yeah, as well as a little bit of salt. So I'm just gonna use some pink sea salt. So the very first thing we want to do is after we've preheated our oven, we're going to assemble all the dry ingredients first. So I'm just gonna grab like a medium-sized bowl, maybe a little bit larger. First, we need 2 cups of old-fashioned oats. 2 whole cups. So I'm gonna grab my measuring cup. That's 1. And 2. This recipe really doesn't take that much time to make. It only takes 8 minutes in the oven. And then obviously we're going to want it to rest for a good amount of time afterwards. Just to make sure that they can kind of firm up and not become too thin or anything like that. But otherwise, it's a pretty quick recipe. Set that back. Next up, we're gonna need our protein powder. Now we're gonna want to go for about 2.5 scoops. Obviously, whatever protein powder you use, the size might be a little different of the scoop. So just roughly estimate it. Just use whatever size scoop you have. So that's 1 scoop, 2 scoops, and a half a scoop. good. Awesome. Next up, we're going to go ahead and grab some of our baking soda. So we're going to need 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon. Again, if you want to make less of these, if you want to make only a portion of this recipe, that's totally fine. Just remember to stay as close as you can to the ratios. It's 1 teaspoon. As well as we're going to need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And for that, I'm just going to give it a few twists of that. Perfect. I'm just going to grab a fork and just mix everything so it's nice and even. I'm actually probably going to have to grab a larger bowl. These are a good amount of oats. From here, I'm going to portion out my butter and I'm going to go ahead and melt it. Ideally, you'd want to have this sitting out on the countertop for a few hours to soften it up, so you really don't have to melt it that much. That way, it's just a lot better for the baking. Don't exactly know why, but that's what I've heard before. But otherwise, if you can't necessarily do that, or if you forget like me, you can just melt it in the oven, or excuse me, in the microwave in about 15-second bursts. So we're gonna need 5 tablespoons. It is softened a little bit for this, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna throw it in there for 15 seconds at a time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm also going to whisk up an egg. So I just have 1 egg in here. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and switch it to that so you guys can get a slightly better idea. Hopefully it'll focus. There we go. Butter's coming on, almost melted. It just needs 1 more pulse. going to give that a second to cool down. Then in a slightly larger bowl, I'm going to go ahead and put in my cane sugar. And we're going to need only 2 teaspoons of cane sugar. So this really isn't that heavy or unhealthy of a recipe. Only has 2 teaspoons. There's 1 and 2. In addition, we are going to need 2 tablespoons of agave. So in my case, I'm going to have 2 tablespoons of honey. And honey is a slightly better source of sugar than actual sugar, but still an okay way. So I'll add the eggs in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in, by weight, I'm going to be about 41 grams. This may take a little bit of time. There we go. And then I'm going to put in the butter. And I'm going to start mixing that around to make sure this is nice and even. After we've mixed that thoroughly, we can add it to our oat mixture. And we're going to make a tiny well. Try to get all of it in there. And mix it all up. Might need to end up adding a little bit more butter as more of a binding agent. Bit of a spill there. Honestly, probably not the worst thing, since I had a little bit too much anyways. Oh, I did totally forget about the vanilla extract, so I'll be sure to add that right now. This definitely just goes to prove I'm not an experienced cook by any means. You know what? I think I'll add a little bit of oat milk. I think that wouldn't be the worst thing. just to get everything to stick together a little bit more. As well as the chocolate chips, which I need to add in a moment. So yeah, I definitely don't have that much vanilla extract, so I'm just going to add the rest of it in. There go the rest of those, and I'll throw in these chocolate chips, the 100% ones. Definitely not going to add a whole ton of these, because they are pretty bitter. And I'll add in a tiny bit of oat milk. And I think this calls for a little bit of hand mixing. Might turn out a little bit crumbly, but that's totally fine. It can be more like a, almost like a crumble almost. Yeah, so I think once we form these, they'll be a little bit more solid. So, what we'll do from here, I'm going to go ahead and grab a sheet pan as well as some parchment paper. And one little trick that I like to do to try to keep the parchment paper a little bit more attached while you're putting the dough on is just grab some binder clips or whatever these are called. Just put them on the sides like that, and you can put them on here. So I'm going to go ahead and form these. Two decent sized chips. Hopefully these turn out okay. There we go. I think I can actually afford to make them a little bit smaller. As well as adding some of these chips back into them. 2 smaller cookies here. There, and last one. Perfect, there we go. So I'm gonna have to play around with the temperature here. It is at 350. I'm gonna let it go for 8 minutes, and then I'll see if I need to make it go for a little bit longer or a little bit less. Well, I don't expect it to be less at all, but most likely a little bit longer, but we'll see. So make sure to take these clips off. I'm gonna go ahead and throw these in the oven for 8 minutes. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of cleanup here while we're just waiting for that to get done anyways. Again guys, I want to shout out Mega Fitness for letting me use this recipe, even though I did mess it up slightly. I'm sure that whenever you guys make it, it'll turn out much better. I'd maybe you start off with a little bit less oats and a little bit less protein powder, and then kind of add it as you go along if you find that it's a little bit too wet, okay? Because again, it's a lot easier to add ingredients rather than take them away. Got about 5 minutes left on that oven timer, guys. And hopefully we'll see from there if we need to go for a little bit longer or a little bit less. much done all the cleanup for that. About another 2-3 minutes here. In the meantime, I'm gonna make my morning superfood veggie fruit shake. I've already covered this in a previous episode, but if you guys didn't happen to see that, might as well do a little bit of multitasking here. What I use is frozen spinach and a berry medley from Trader Joe's. I used to use fresh spinach, but I found that frozen spinach lets you use a little bit more, and it tastes about the same and doesn't really add anything different. Plus, it's a little bit cheaper. So I start off usually with about 50 to 60-ish grams of frozen spinach. Go. And then about 150, 140 grams of the berries. After that, I also have Amazing Grass Green Superfood powder, because I definitely don't eat enough veggies. While it's not ideal, this definitely helps me get a little bit more of those vitamins and nutrients in. So I would always recommend definitely having actual whole foods in your diet. That's going to be a lot better. It's going to be a lot less processed. But otherwise, if you really have to, you can go with this. It is going to be definitely more expensive, but sometimes it's just a little bit more convenient. As well as about 14-ish grams of chia seeds. Chia seeds have good omegas. They have a good amount of fiber. Looks like a good amount of calcium and a little bit of potassium as well. So I add that in. And then one thing that you could do is, instead of just water for the liquid, you could add some sort of other drink, like maybe beetroot juice, pomegranate juice, something like that. But I just grabbed water. I put in about 12 ounces just to make sure that it's not too thick. I'll go ahead and mute it while I blend it up just to make sure it's not too loud. And the timer is up on the oven here in a moment, but I think I am going to let it go for about 2 more minutes here. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let it go for about another 2-3-ish minutes just to let them set a little bit more. Awesome, and there we go. Here's my morning superfood smoothie. I have pretty much one of these every single day in the morning, just because my usual normal breakfast is a slice of Dave's Killer Bread, about half to a third to a fourth of avocado, as well as about 3 to 4 eggs and a piece of bacon or two. So it's definitely not a lot of fruits and veggies, but this definitely helps get in a good amount. It's about maybe 2-3-ish servings. So you want to make sure you have a relatively high-powered blender to get all those chia seeds broken up, to make sure that they're not like kind of in there, unless you don't really mind that texture. Otherwise, it can get just like a little bit annoying after a while. Awesome, and here's the shake. It's really not that bad. I'd say the berries are probably the most prominent flavor. The spinach doesn't really add much. That superfood powder isn't too strong, and the chia seeds only really add texture, not really any sort of flavor. So you could go with just like a single berry if you prefer that, like maybe just blueberries, just raspberries, just strawberries, just raspberries, or I don't know what I said. This berry medley is looking blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, and then strawberries. You could just go with one of those if you wanted instead of all 4, but that's totally up to you guys. I'll set that to drink that a little bit later. I'm gonna go ahead and check up on these cookies. Let me think. I think these are pretty much good to go. They are going to need a good amount of rest time, just to let them really set, because I just cooked them a little bit and they are a little bit fragile, but I think overall they turned out pretty decent. Here they are. So you can see they definitely have a good amount of thickness to them. You guys can't really see it from there. Maybe a little bit like that. But yeah, awesome. So I'll get probably a slightly better picture after they've cooled down fully and are actually a little bit more firm and able to be handled, because right now they'll just kind of deflate a little bit and break apart if I touch them. But anyways, thank you all so much for joining me again for another episode of Cooking with Coach. I want to thank Mecca Fitness for letting me use a recipe for this. Be sure to stay tuned for our next recipe, which should be this Wednesday at 7 p.m. The recipe is to be determined, should be posted by tonight or tomorrow. And as always, it won't be anything that's too complex. Hopefully you'll have some of the ingredients at home to try to minimize traveling out to grocery stores and stuff. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you next time.